Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Hello, I'm Dave Allison, president and founding partner at Clarity to Prosperity. I had a great conversation with Jason Smith and Maddie Grimm during our coffee break discussing AI in the financial services industry. We discussed our own use of AI tools and how prompt engineering can leverage AI to its full potential through some examples Jason and I share. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy. Most of us are so pre-programmed to use Google or Yahoo search or Bing or whatever search engine you're using. And we think that these AI tools are search, and they're the exact opposite of search. Search is meant for you to put in a couple keywords for it to web crawl the internet and try to find the most relevant information to what your keywords are, and then provide you back clickable links for then you to go explore on your own. Where with these different AI tools that we have, they're really built around prompt engineering, where you want to put in a whole bunch of context. Think about if you were to lead a project and you had a team of your people in the room and they needed to understand what your vision, what your expectations, what your limits were, what your requirements were around achieving the project, you would spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes telling them all these things. And then they would go off and do all of these things. And to Jason's point, a week or 2 weeks or a month later, they'd come back. And that's how you need to use these tools as you think about how you input data into them.
And go ahead. The mistake I was making until we hired that group that provided us some training, right? I don't remember. What's the name of that group again? The Jeff Woods group?
Yeah, it's the AI-Driven Leader is his book that he wrote. Yeah. It's on Amazon now.
Yeah, it's a great book. And I've known Jeff for years, and through Front Row Dads, actually, him and I are in that. He's a brilliant guy. And the thing is, I was making that mistake prior to having the whole company go through those trainings that he provides. Is I was using it like I would just ask it a question, right? Versus now what I'm getting in the habit of, and by no means am I as far along as many, especially like you've really been embracing it, Dave. But even when I did this investment news, I said, act like a chief financial officer for a top financial services company. And I want you to act like a data analyst. I think I even used the words data analyst, chief financial officer. So I almost got AI understanding of how I wanted it to act. You know what I mean? In when they were looking at the information, and therefore what type of advice that they were going to provide back to me.
Yeah, definitely. But the key is context, right? And that's been the biggest evolution of these AI models over the last 2 years since I've been using them. Is when they first came out, their context windows were very small. Now their context windows are almost limitless, especially, and I would highly recommend everyone to use the paid version of these things, not the free version of these things. And Maddie, I know you've been an early adopter of some of this stuff and using it at C2P for a while too. And I think that's the benefit of this stuff and using it in your daily life for almost anything that you have the ability to do. Like, it is such a powerful brainstorming partner, but it starts with the right prompt engineering, which I can give you a little bit of kind of background into in a minute. But Maddie, I'd love to hear how you're using it and some examples like that our advisors might be able to tap into in their daily practices.
Obviously, I'm speaking from like kind of the content creation perspective. I use it all the time just to make things easier, to make things quicker for content creation. I really use it as like an assistant, like we've been taught, like to use it to not just create the content, but assist you in creating the content. So I usually use it for a lot of the things that we do on a daily. So podcast descriptions or blogs or email campaigns, like anything that we typically do, I'll start there. And the same thing, I'll give it all the context it requires. I'll tell it either who I'm working for, I'm at the marketing agency, or C2P needs this, and give it all the context it needs. Because you really do have to teach it what you want it to give you. A big thing I do too is I give it a lot of examples. So usually you can upload like a couple of files. I think the max for some of them is 5 or something. So I usually upload like as many as I can, whether it's, oh, this is like a writing sample of something I've written for this client before, or this is an example of like how it usually looks, and anything in between, or like just to give it additional context. And yeah, so I use it for pretty much all of our content needs to get started. And then from there, I can really refine it. And if it's something like, if it's like a blog that maybe I don't know the topic as well, or I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't speak. So I can usually just do the interview format and tell it, I want this type of blog about tax management, and this is my audience, and they can help me refine it more to like, what do they care about? What does this client care about more? And then I can pick that. And then, okay, that's the angle I'm going to use for this blog specifically. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah. I want to share an example like in real practice. And this just happened with a case me and Bibbo were working on. A guy, Jason, actually introduced us to, high net worth guy worth like $50-60 million in California. Father really built most of the wealth and family business and real estate. And his dad's 76 years old. His mom's 65. And he's trying to figure out a way to support his dad's retirement lifestyle, given the fact that like most of their assets are held hostage in real estate and they're subject to just the cash flow and the distribution of the real estate. And like most other highly concentrated real estate investors, they've depreciated down most of the buildings. And so if they sold one of the buildings to generate the cash the dad needs, they'd have a massive tax liability. So at the end of the Discover meeting, I was like, Sam, one thing that's jumping out at me is I was like, are you guys charitably inclined at all? And he was like, yeah, we give to charities. We're pretty involved in some Jewish charities around here. And I said, there's this concept that we might be able to set up a tax exempt trust. And we could take one of your properties, let's say the one for 10 million bucks that you fully depreciated down, and we could move that property into the tax exempt trust. And then we could sell the property. And now we've got $10 million of cash that we can buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and annuities with to basically give your dad a lifetime income stream and your mom. That's a much higher payout than the real estate would provide, with zero tax liability upon selling that. And he was like, oh my God, like, that sounds like it could be perfect. The caveat is when your mom and dad pass away, whatever money's left in that trust goes to the charities of your choosing. And that's the trade-off between the tax-free sale. But we have a wealth replacement strategy where we could buy a second to die life insurance policy on your mom and dad that fully makes you and your brother whole for all the money that goes to charity. And he was like, this whole meeting was worth it just from you sharing that thing, right? And so the next morning I'm at the gym and I'm doing and I know this only took me 4 minutes because I do a 5-minute warm up on the treadmill. I put in ChatGPT while I was on the treadmill, help me write an executive summary of transferring a highly appreciated real estate investment into a charitable remainder trust to generate cash flow for a retiree by selling real estate tax-free in the CRT and using the proceeds to generate a higher cash flow payment for the beneficiary. So it wrote me a really simple executive summary with some of the key points, the financial benefits, and the conclusion. And I was like, this is pretty good, but not what I quite want. I said, include some of the requirements of the real estate once it's in the CRT, such as the family not being able to buy it or live in it, and also how you can buy life insurance on the beneficiary so that when they pass away and the trust goes to the charity, the family can be made whole with the policy proceeds. So it incorporated all of that language of a wealth replacement for the charity and some of the considerations of what can happen to the real estate once it's in the CRT. And so then what I was like, all right, this is pretty good. But I said, help me turn this into a blog post for my website by creating a better captivating opening. Try to incorporate a story of an example of a client with 5 million in real estate on a 75-year-old that executed this. And it turned it into a story, right? Instead of just being a bunch of stats and data. And then what I did was I wanted to play with it because it came back at an estimated 25% tax. I said, change the tax to closer to 35% to account for federal, state taxes and depreciation recapture. So it literally calculated all of the taxes, federal tax at 20%, South Carolina tax of 7%, depreciation recapture. But then I said, no, this client's, because it knew I live in South Carolina. I said, incorporate how John's wife is 65 years old. The charitable remainder trust was set up for joint lifetime income. The life insurance policy was a second to die that would pay the full kids. And it basically kept helping me curate and craft this story. I said, for taxes, change the state to California, also include the net investment income tax on top of the 20% capital gain and depreciation recapture. And so it recalculated all the data and all the numbers. And then I said, let's increase the CRT payment to 7% from 6%. So I'm using it as a thought partner, just literally on the treadmill, talking into it, telling it the things that I want it to do. Then I said, write me a 240 character summary for the blog post, write a tag title of up to 100 characters, and shorten the title. It put all that together. And I literally just put it on my website using a charitable remainder trust to diversify real estate tax-free and increase your cash flow. Imagine this, John, a 75-year-old retires with 5 million. It walks through the challenge, the solution, the benefits, and then how to take the next step. And I was able to, within a day after that client meeting, be like, hey, Sam, I know this was an option that potentially interests you. I don't know if it's going to be a fit or not, but here's a little more insight for you and your brother to read about how this strategy could work, right? Like that was done basically 5 minutes on a treadmill. And then we use FMG Suite for our website through C2P's relationship and just copy, pasted, compliance had it approved within 2 hours, and it was out the door to the client. So that's some of the stuff that you all could be implementing as you think about how to wow these clients after a meeting with additional information, follow-up, or resources. So I think that's a really powerful example of taking some of the stuff Maddie's talking about of content creation and leveraging these tools as a thought partner.
Yeah, Dave, everybody knows stories are the best ways to explain things, right? And what you just did is, I think it's a big breakthrough, because think about big client opportunities afterward, to be able to put it in there, give all the general information, obviously no PII on that client, but general information, and then explain the benefits of having this plan or strategy in place. It doesn't have to be charitable remainder trust. It can be a multitude of different things, and a successful story, right, that literally illustrates the results of implementation of the recommendations or the plan. It's like, how powerful is that to be able to have that even as a tool, being like, here's an example of what that can look like for a client.
And I think for me, most of you know me, I'm pretty technical in nature, right? And so if I would write the content, it'd be all like numbers and technical components. But that's where I've loved being able to have ChatGPT be the storyteller for me, because I can say, now turn all this technical stuff into a really easy story to follow. And again, people gravitate to stories more than anything. And so I think that's one really powerful way to use it. And I'm putting in the text box here what I would say are like the 7 components of really good prompt engineering. I'd highly recommend capturing those, taking them, and starting to think about this as you do your own prompt engineering. You need to clearly outline the task you want AI to accomplish. Think about it. I want you to write this executive summary of transferring highly appreciated real estate into a CRT for a tax-free sale to produce a retiree with higher cash flow. Then you want to establish the limits. These are like what you don't want AI to do. This helps avoid hallucination, right? So AIs can hallucinate. So again, in the context of the real estate one, if you go to the blog, the context was when I was like, change the tax code, change it from 20%, add the net investment income tax, change the state from South Carolina to California, increase the CRT payout from 6% to 7%. Specify any additional requirements. Think about what I did with the real estate blog. I took it from at first an executive memo. These are the high level points. And then, as Jason mentioned, I turned it into a story, right? With a captivating opening. Then you could assign a persona. Jason gave a great example of this. Act as a chief financial officer. Act as a top marketing and branding expert, right? Telling it how to think and act, and then ask the AI to interview you. This was one of the biggest game changers when somebody taught me this, is I never thought about saying, go ahead and ask me additional questions, one question at a time, to help you better understand what we're looking to do, right? If I was in a meeting with a bunch of our team and I was telling them a project we wanted to get done, I'd be like, all right, does anyone have any questions for me? And that would be where the clarifying questions come. But I wasn't doing that with my AI team, right? And so that's a great one. And then ask it to explain why, or it can challenge you. Hey, you explained this financial metric in my business is out of whack from a benchmarking. Explain why. And I think if you can try to utilize these 7 components into how you're engaging with these systems, you'll be pretty blown away over time at what the outcome and how good you'll get at this will be. Like, I hardly go to Google anymore. And I constantly am using these tools as a brainstorming partner, a thought partner, an analytics partner. So hopefully that's helpful, and happy to answer any questions. I think something important to remember, AI confidentially, you can select data controls in ChatGPT. Yeah, so like what Corey's referring to there, this is why I say pay the $20 a month. It's like a no-brainer. Get the Teams account of OpenAI and ChatGPT. And what you can do in your settings is you can ask it not to learn from you. That's where it basically isn't going to train the model on your information. Now, there's some times where you might want it to train the model on your information. Like when I'm doing all my content creation for my website and stuff, like I want it to train on that. I want to be able to have somebody go into ChatGPT one day and say, who's the best advisor in America on equity compensation and taxation? And I want Dave Allison to pop up. Like those are things I want the model to learn from me. But there's also stuff about my family and my dog and stuff. I don't need that stuff on the internet or in these large language models. Again, that's really important. Ivy asked, is it ChatGPT only? If you're not using any of them, I think ChatGPT is the best place to start because it's the best. It is the most robust for the core of what you're going to do. Maddie, I know you were using Claude, and I've used Claude a bit for content creation. Talk a little bit about that in kind of the minute we have left.
Yeah, I prefer Claude just for writing because I think it's just a better writer. It just gives you a little bit more details that you don't even have to ask for every time. So I like to use that for content creation. And it's getting really cool too, where you can even select different versions of it so that, oh, this model is the most intelligent versus this model is best for writing. So there's a lot of different things you can do with it.
Yeah, and when you start to become a ninja on this stuff, you'll use multiple. For example, ChatGPT, in my opinion, is smarter and it has a better ability to reason and use logic, especially in their new 1.0 mini model. And so I might say, create this whole executive summary on a strategy of transferring highly appreciated real estate to a CRT and blah, blah, blah. And I would have it produce the entire executive summary. And then I might take that executive summary over to Claude and now be like, write this in a really great, captivating story that can be used as a blog post. So like these models at some point in our evolution are going to interact with each other autonomously, most likely. But like now it's a little manual. But again, starting point, ChatGPT, you can't go wrong.
And in closing, what I would really suggest to everyone listening is, as Dave said, get the paid version, right? Get the Teams version of ChatGPT. Use the 7 steps. And if nothing else, just prepare before you go in there, opposed to just winging it off the cuff like you would with Google. Think through it a little bit, right? Think through the context and who you want them to act like when they're providing you the advice. And just more details, the better. Think through that and maybe even write it down before you go in there and start implementing, because that's where you're going to get your best result.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.